A time-traveling chef in ancient Peru, 1100. What if you woke up 900 years in the past, surrounded by a civilization on the brink of collapse, with nothing but your wits and a skill no one understands? Could you survive? Could you change history? Meet Aiden Carter, a 29-year-old American chef from New York, who's about to find out. In this thrilling tale, you'll discover how one man's modern culinary genius battles starvation, superstition, and a ticking clock in the heart of the Inca Empire. Stick around to uncover a secret so wild it could rewrite the past, and maybe even Aiden's future. The air was sharp, biting with the chill of dawn, and Aiden Carter's breath fogged in front of him as he stumbled through the mist. His chef's jacket, still smeared with last night's béarnaise sauce from his bustling Manhattan restaurant, felt absurdly out of place against the jagged peaks of the Andes. Just hours ago, he'd been plating a perfect coq au vin for a table of Wall Street tycoons, the clink of wine glasses and jazz humming in the background. Now he was here, wherever here was, surrounded by towering stone terraces and the distant bleat of llamas. His phone, dead in his pocket, was as useless as the Rolex on his wrist, its hands frozen at 11:59 p.m. How had this happened? 1 minute he'd been stepping into the alley behind his restaurant to toss out a bag of scraps. The next, a blinding flash, a sickening lurch, and he was sprawled on cold, unfamiliar earth. Aiden's heart pounded as he scanned the horizon. The sun was rising, painting the mountains gold, but the sight only deepened his dread. This wasn't New York. This wasn't even 2025. The air smelled of wood smoke, and something ancient, like history itself, was breathing down his neck. He staggered to his feet, his sneakers sinking into the damp soil, and caught sight of figures moving in the distance. Men and women in woven tunics, their faces weathered, their eyes wary. They carried baskets of what looked like potatoes, small and knobby, nothing like the russets he'd turned into truffle fries back home. His stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since yesterday's staff meal. But hunger was the least of his problems. As he crept closer, hiding behind a stone wall, Aiden overheard their voices, soft, rhythmic, speaking a language he couldn't place. Quechua, maybe? He'd read about the Inca Empire in a college history class, but that was a lifetime ago. The people looked gaunt, their cheeks hollow, their movements sluggish. Aiden's chef instincts kicked in malnutrition. He could see it in their dull eyes, the way their tunics hung loose on their frames. These people were starving, or close to it. The baskets they carried held meager harvests, potatoes, quinoa, maybe some maize, but nothing that screamed abundance. His mind raced. He knew food. He knew how to take scraps and turn them into magic. Could he help? Or would he be the one needing help in a world that didn't know stainless steel or sous vide? The mystery of how he'd gotten here gnawed at him. That flash in the alley, had it been lightning? A freak accident? Something supernatural? He shook his head, trying to focus. Survival first. Questions later. He stepped out from behind the wall, hands raised to show he meant no harm. The villagers froze, their eyes locking onto him. A woman dropped her basket, potatoes tumbling into the dirt. A man with a woven headband barked something, pointing a spear at Aiden's chest. Aiden's pulse spiked. Whoa, I'm friendly, he said, his voice cracking. They didn't understand, of course. Why would they? He was a stranger in a strange land, his pale skin and odd clothes marking him as an outsider. Or worse, a threat. A young girl, no older than 10, tugged at the man's tunic, whispering something. Her eyes were wide, curious, not hostile. Aiden seized the chance. He pointed to his mouth, then mimed eating, hoping hunger was a universal language. The man with the spear hesitated, then lowered it slightly. The girl stepped forward, holding out a small, shriveled potato. Aiden took it, his fingers brushing hers. It was pitiful, barely the size of a golf ball, but it was a start. He smiled, nodding thanks, and pulled his pocket knife from his jeans. The villagers gasped as he flicked it open, the steel glinting in the sun. Great, Aiden. Scare them more, he thought. But he knelt, slicing the potato into thin rounds, then pointed at a nearby fire pit, where embers glowed faintly. Fire, he said, gesturing. Cook. The girl tilted her head, intrigued. The man with the spear watched, still tense. Aiden's mind spun. He needed to prove he wasn't a threat, and fast. Food was his weapon, his way in. He'd seen what a good meal could do. Turn strangers into friends, skeptics into believers. Back in New York, his pop-up dinners had sold out in hours. Foodies raving about his smoked brisket and charred octopus. But here, he had no spices, no olive oil, no immersion blender. Just a potato, a fire, and a crowd ready to skewer him if he screwed up. He scanned the area, spotting a flat stone near the fire. Perfect. He'd make do. He arranged the potato slices on the stone, letting the heat work its magic. The villagers watched, murmuring. The girl crept closer, sniffing the air as the slices began to crisp. Aiden's heart lifted. That smell, caramelized starch, earthy and warm, was universal. He sprinkled a pinch of salt from a tiny packet he kept in his jacket, a chef's habit, always prepared. The villager's eyes widened as he offered the girl a slice. She hesitated, then took it, nibbling cautiously. Her face lit up, a grin spreading as she chewed. The man with the spear lowered his weapon entirely, stepping forward to try a piece. His grunt of approval was the sweetest sound Aiden had ever heard. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. Hooves thundered in the distance, and the villagers scattered, dropping to their knees. Aiden turned, his stomach lurching. A group of warriors approached, their tunics adorned with bright feathers, their faces painted with fierce patterns. At their center was a man in a golden headdress, his presence commanding, his eyes sharp as obsidian. This was no village elder. This was someone important, a chief, a king, maybe the Sapa Inca himself. Aiden's mouth went dry. The man's gaze locked onto him, taking in his strange clothes, his pale skin, the knife still in his hand. The warriors raised their spears, and Aiden realized he'd just gone from curious outsider to potential sacrifice. What had he stumbled into? How could a chef from 2025 survive in a world of stone and superstition? And what was that flash that brought him here? A cosmic fluke or something more? As the warriors closed in, Aiden's mind raced. He had one chance to prove his worth, and it wasn't going to be with words. It would be with food. Little did he know, his skills were about to face the ultimate test, one that could save a civilization or end with his blood on an altar. Aiden Carter stood frozen, the cold Indian wind slicing through his chef's jacket as the warriors' spears glinted in the morning sun. The man in the golden headdress, the Sapa Inca, Aiden was sure of it, stared down at him from a litter carried by 4 stoic bearers. The villagers knelt in the dirt, heads bowed, their baskets of meager potatoes and quinoa abandoned. Aiden's pulse hammered in his ears. He'd faced tough critics before, snobby food bloggers, Michelin inspectors with poker faces, but this was different. One wrong move, and he'd be a human offering to some sun god. His only weapon was a half-cooked potato slice and a grin he hoped didn't scream, "I'm totally screwed." The Sapa Inca raised a hand, and the warriors parted. A wiry man stepped forward, his tunic dyed a deep crimson, a necklace of turquoise beads clinking around his neck. His eyes were sharp, skeptical, and his lips curled into a sneer as he sized Aiden up. This had to be the local chef, or whatever passed for one in 1100 Peru. Aiden dubbed him Cusco Carl in his head, a nod to the nearest city he could recall from his half-remembered history lessons. Carl barked something in Quechua, pointing at the stone where Aiden's potato slices sizzled. The villagers murmured, their fear giving way to curiosity. Aiden caught the girl from earlier, her name, he'd learned, was Inti, watching him with wide, hopeful eyes. "Look, I'm just a cook," Aiden said, raising his hands, his pocket knife tucked safely back in his jeans. "I make food. Good food." He mimed eating again, then pointed at the potato slices, which were now golden and crisp, their earthy aroma cutting through the smoky air. Carl snorted, unimpressed, but the Sapa Inca's gaze flickered with interest. He spoke, his voice low and commanding, and Carl translated, his tone dripping with disdain. "The Sapa Inca, Lord of the 4 Quarters, demands to know who you are and why you bring strange fire to our lands." Aiden's mind raced. How do you explain time travel to people who think the sun is a god? I'm Aiden from far away. New York, a big village across the sea. He winced internally. Geography wasn't his strong suit, and he had no idea if the Inca even knew what an ocean was. "I know food. I can make your meals better, tastier, stronger. He gestured at the villagers, their gaunt faces proof of their struggle. I can help. Carl laughed, a sharp, mocking sound, and spat something in Quechua that made the warriors chuckle. Inti, though, stepped forward, holding up her potato slice like a trophy. She spoke rapidly, her voice high and earnest, and the Sapa Inca's expression softened. He nodded, and Carl's smirk faltered. The Sapa Inca grants you a chance, stranger, Carl said, his eyes narrowing. You will cook with me. If your food pleases, you live. If not, he drew a finger across his throat, the universal sign for your toast. Aiden swallowed hard but nodded. Cooking was his turf. He could do this. Right. The warriors escorted him to a stone-walled kitchen, a far cry from his sleek Manhattan setup. No gas burners, no Vitamix, just a fire pit, clay pots, and a pile of ingredients that looked like they'd been scraped from the bottom of a farmer's market reject bin. Potatoes, quinoa, maize, some dried llama meat, and a few herbs that smelled like they'd been picked by someone with a grudge. Carl watched him like a hawk, arms crossed, clearly expecting him to fail. Aiden's first move was to roast more potatoes, but this time with a twist. He remembered a trick from his Brooklyn pop-up days, charring vegetables on hot stones to coax out their sweetness. He sliced the potatoes thin, like rustic chips, and tossed them with a pinch of his precious salt packet. Then he spotted a pile of coca leaves, legal here, he figured, and maybe a flavor booster. He crushed a few into a paste, mixing it with water to make a glaze. The kitchen filled with a nutty, caramelized scent as the potatoes crisped up. Carl raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Next, Aiden tackled the quinoa. Back home, it was a hipster staple, but here it was survival food, boiled into a bland mush. He rinsed the grains, then toasted them over the fire to bring out a nutty depth. He mixed in bits of dried llama meat, rehydrated in a clay pot with water, and crushed maize for a makeshift stock. The result was a hearty, fragrant stew that made Inti, who'd snuck into the kitchen, clap her hands in delight. Aiden grinned, feeling the old thrill of creation. This was his element, turning nothing into something. But Carl wasn't impressed. He shoved Aiden aside, presenting his own dish, a grayish porridge of maize and herbs, the kind of thing you'd feed to someone you didn't like. This is food of the gods, Carl declared, offering a bowl to the Sapa Inca, who'd arrived to judge. Aiden's heart sank. The Sapa Inca tasted Carl's porridge first, his face unreadable. Then he took a bite of Aiden's quinoa stew, followed by a potato chip glazed with coca. The silence was agonizing. Finally, the Sapa Inca nodded, a faint smile breaking through. The villagers cheered, and Indy beamed, but Carl's face darkened. Aiden had won this round, but he'd also made an enemy. That night, as the village feasted on Aiden's dishes, he sat by the fire, Inti at his side, teaching him Quechua words for salt and fire. He was starting to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe he could belong here. But then Carl cornered him, his voice low and venomous. You think you're clever, stranger? The mountains are our kitchen, not yours. The gods will judge you. He gestured to the looming peaks, which Aiden had jokingly called nature's oven earlier, earning laughs from the villagers. Carl's words chilled him. Was it just jealousy? Or did Carl know something about this place? About the flash that brought Aiden here? The next morning, the stakes skyrocketed. The Sapa Inca summoned Aiden to the central plaza, where a crowd had gathered for a festival announcement. Through Carl's grudging translation, Aiden learned the truth. The empire was in crisis. A drought had ravaged their crops, and the people were starving. The upcoming Inti Raymi festival, honoring the sun god, was their last hope to appease the heavens. The Sapa Inca pointed at Aiden. You, stranger, will cook for the festival in 2 days. A feast to please Inti himself. If the gods are satisfied, the rains will come. If not, he paused, his eyes cold, you will be offered to the sun. Aiden's stomach dropped. 2 days to cook a feast that could save a civilization, or end with him as a sacrifice. He glanced at the mountains, their peaks shrouded in mist. Nature's oven, he muttered, trying to lighten his own terror. Inti giggled, but Carl's glare was murderous. Aiden had to pull this off, not just for himself, but for these people, who'd welcomed his food despite their fear. He thought of his restaurant, his team back in New York, the way they'd rallied during a brutal dinner rush. He could do this. He had to. But the challenges piled up fast. The ingredients were even scarcer than he'd thought. Most of the maize was moldy, the potatoes small and bitter. Carl accidentally spilled Aiden's remaining salt, smirking as it scattered into the dirt. And then there was the time pressure. 2 days to invent a menu that would impress a king and a god, with no modern tools and a rival who'd love to see him fail. Aiden's only allies were Inti, who scrounged extra herbs, and his own ingenuity. He started experimenting, grinding maize into a coarse flour for flatbreads, roasting llama fat to mimic butter, and even fermenting quinoa water for a tangy drink. Each success felt like a small victory, but the clock was ticking, and Carl's sabotage grew bolder. Missing knives, tainted water, whispers to the warriors that Aiden was a fraud. The night before the festival, Aiden worked by firelight, his hands blistered, his mind racing. He'd created a menu: roasted potato medallions with coca glaze, quinoa-stuffed maize cakes, and a llama jerky stew spiced with wild herbs. It was bold, maybe too bold, but it was all he had. As he tasted the stew, he caught Inti staring at the mountains, her face troubled. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "The mountains, they speak. They brought you here." Aiden's skin prickled. Was she talking about the flash? The door through time he'd been trying to ignore? Before he could press her, Carl appeared, his smile venomous. "Tomorrow, stranger, you cook or you die." The morning of the Inti Raymi festival dawned with a sky so clear it felt like the sun god himself was watching. Aiden Carter stood in the stone-walled kitchen, his chef's jacket tattered, his hands calloused from 2 days of relentless work. The air buzzed with the hum of the village, drums pounding, flutes wailing, and the chatter of hundreds gathering in the plaza of what Aiden had mentally dubbed Cuzco Square, a nod to the Inca capital he'd read about in a dusty college textbook. His heart raced like it did during a Saturday night rush at his Manhattan restaurant, but this was no pop-up dinner. This was life or death. In mere hours, he'd serve a feast to appease the Sapa Inca and, supposedly, the sun god Inti. Success meant salvation for a starving empire and his own survival. Failure? His blood on a stone altar, a grim offering to the heavens. The stakes had never been higher. Aiden's menu: roasted potato medallions with coca glaze, quinoa-stuffed maize cakes, and a llama jerky stew spiced with wild herbs, was a gamble, blending his modern culinary instincts with the sparse ingredients of 1100 Peru. He'd spent the last 2 days fighting scarcity, sabotage, and his own doubts. Cuzco Carl, the local chef with a grudge sharper than obsidian, had accidentally spilled Aiden's salt, tainted his water, and whispered to the warriors that Aiden's strange ways were an insult to the gods. Yet Aiden had pushed through, fueled by adrenaline and the wide-eyed faith of Inti, the young girl who'd become his unlikely ally. Her words last night, about the mountains speaking and bringing him here, still echoed in his mind, a riddle he couldn't solve. Was his time travel a fluke, or was something bigger at play? The kitchen was a battlefield. Clay pots simmered over fire pits, their steam curling into the crisp Andean air. Aiden moved like a man possessed, flipping maize cakes on a hot stone, stirring the stew to keep it from scorching, and checking the potatoes for that perfect char. The aroma was intoxicating, earthy, smoky, with a hint of the coca glaze that made his dishes sing. Inti darted around, fetching herbs and dodging Carl's glares. The oldest chef was preparing his own dishes, a traditional maize porridge and roasted guinea pig, safe but uninspired. Aiden knew Carl was banking on familiarity to win the Sapa Inca's favor. Aiden's food, though, was a risk, a fusion of future flair and ancient ingredients. Would it dazzle or offend? As the festival hour approached, warriors escorted Aiden and Carl to the plaza, where a massive crowd had gathered. The Sapa Inca sat on a golden throne, his headdress gleaming like a second sun. Nobles in feathered cloaks and priests in white tunics flanked him, their faces stern. The villagers, still gaunt from the drought, watched with a mix of hope and skepticism. Aiden's stomach churned. This wasn't just about feeding people. It was about convincing a civilization that his food could save them. He glanced at the mountains, their peaks looming like silent judges. Nature's oven. he muttered, a nervous joke that made Inti giggle despite the tension. The feast began with Carl's dishes. Servants carried out clay bowls of porridge and platters of guinea pig, the meat glistening with fat. The Sapa Inca tasted each, his expression unreadable, though the nobles nodded politely. The crowd ate eagerly, but Aiden saw their faces, satisfied, but not inspired. Carl shot him a smug look, as if to say, "Beat that, stranger." Aiden's turn came, and his heart pounded as he presented his creations. The potato medallions, golden and crisp, shimmered with coca glaze. The maize cakes, stuffed with nutty quinoa, were puffed up like rustic empanadas. The llama stew, rich and fragrant, steamed in its pots, drawing gasps from the crowd as the scent hit them. Aiden held his breath as the Sapa Inca took his first bite, a potato medallion. The ruler chewed slowly, his eyes narrowing. The silence was suffocating. Then he reached for a maize cake, breaking it open to reveal the quinoa within. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Finally, he sipped the stew, and a faint smile curved his lips. The nobles followed suit, their eyes widening as they tasted the unfamiliar flavors. The villagers, given smaller portions, began to cheer, their hunger giving way to delight. Inti clapped, her grin brighter than the sun. Aiden exhaled, relief flooding him. He'd done it. He'd won them over. But the victory was short-lived. Carl stepped forward, his face twisted with fury. "Blasphemy!" he shouted, pointing at Aiden. "This stranger defile our traditions. His food is not of Inti, it is of demons." The crowd hushed, and the priests exchanged uneasy glances. Aiden's blood ran cold. Carl was playing dirty, weaponizing superstition. The Sapa Inca raised a hand, silencing the plaza. "Speak, stranger," he said through a translator. "Why should we trust your food?" Aiden's mind raced. He wasn't a public speaker. He was a chef, damn it. But he had to fight back. "My food comes from knowledge, not demons," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "Where I'm from, far across the sea, we've learned to make food that strengthens the body, lifts the spirit. Look at your people." He gestured to the villagers, some still clutching his maize cakes. "They're smiling. They're full. This food can help you survive the drought. It's not magic, it's just better cooking." He forced a grin, hoping his charm could bridge centuries. The Sapa Inca studied him, then turned to the head priest, a gaunt man with eyes like burning coals. The priest whispered something, and the ruler's face darkened. "The gods demand proof," he said. "Your food pleases us, but Inti's favor is not yet certain. You will face the trial of the sun." Aiden's heart sank. "Trial? What trial?" Inti grabbed his hand, her eyes wide with fear. Carl smirked, clearly in on the plan. Before Aiden could protest, warriors seized him, dragging him to a stone platform at the plaza's edge. The crowd parted, revealing a terrifying sight, a massive stone altar, stained with what Aiden prayed wasn't blood. The head priest stepped forward, holding a golden knife that gleamed wickedly in the sunlight. "To prove your food is blessed," the priest intoned, "you must offer a sacrifice. Cook your finest dish, stranger, and place it on the altar. If Inti accepts it, the rains will come. If not," he didn't finish, but the knife said enough. Aiden's mind spiraled. A sacrifice. In 2 hours? He had no ingredients left. Carl had seen to that, hiding the last of the quinoa and maize. The crowd was watching, the Sapa Inca's gaze heavy, and Inti's small hand trembled in his. He was out of time, out of resources, and out of ideas. Or was he? His chef's instincts kicked in, the same ones that had saved him during a power outage at his restaurant when he'd improvised a raw bar by candlelight. He scanned the plaza, spotting a few discarded potato skins and a handful of wild herbs Inti had gathered. It wasn't much, but it was something. He sprinted back to the kitchen, Inti at his heels, and got to work. He mashed the potato skins into a paste, mixing in the herbs for flavor. He found a single ear of maize, half moldy, and stripped the good kernels to grind into a coarse flour. With no time to roast, he shaped the mixture into small patties and cooked them on the hottest stone he could find, praying for a miracle. The result was crude, more survival food than fine dining, but it smelled like hope. He carried the patties to the altar, his hands shaking, and placed them before the priest. The crowd held its breath. The priest raised the golden knife, chanting to the sky. Aiden's stomach twisted. Was this it? Would his dish be enough? Or would he be the next thing on that altar? Suddenly, a shadow fell over the plaza. Aiden looked up, his heart stopping. Clouds, thick, dark clouds, were rolling in, obscuring the sun. A drop of rain hit his cheek, then another. The crowd gasped, then cheered, their voices rising into a roar. The priest lowered his knife, his face stunned. The Sapa Inca stood, raising his arms. "Inti has spoken," he declared. "The stranger's food is blessed." Aiden collapsed to his knees, rain soaking his jacket, relief crashing over him like the downpour. The villagers danced, their faces alight with joy. Inti hugged him, laughing through tears. Even Carl was silent, his sabotage undone by the heavens themselves. The drought was over, and Aiden had done the impossible. But as the crowd celebrated, the head priest approached, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. "You are no ordinary man," he whispered. "The mountains brought you here. They will call you again." Aiden's skin prickled. The mountains. The flesh. Inti's words. Was this trial just the beginning? As the rain fell, he felt the weight of a new mystery, one that could pull him deeper into this ancient world, or send him back to his own. The rain fell in sheets, soaking Aiden Carter's tattered chef's jacket as he stood in the heart of Cusco Square, the plaza alive with the joyous chaos of the Inti Raymi festival. The villagers danced, their faces radiant with hope, their hunger forgotten under the miraculous downpour that had broken the drought. The Sapa Inca, resplendent in his golden headdress, had declared Aiden's food blessed by Inti, the sun god, sparing him from the sacrificial altar. The air was thick with the scent of wet stone and roasted maize, and for the first time since his inexplicable leap from a 2025 Manhattan alley to the Andes of 1100, Aiden felt a flicker of belonging. He'd done it, turned potato skins and desperation into a feast that saved a starving empire. But the head priest's cryptic words echoed in his mind. "The mountains brought you here. They will call you again." What did that mean? Was his time travel a one-way ticket? Or was there a way back to New York? As the crowd chanted his name, well, their version of it, something like Aiden, gift of Inti. Inti, the young girl who'd been a shadow through this ordeal, tugged at his sleeve. Her eyes sparkled with pride, but there was a shadow in them, a nervousness Aiden hadn't seen before. "You did it," she whispered in her halting Quechua, mixed with the few English words he'd taught her. "But the mountains, they watch." She pointed to the looming peaks, their jagged silhouettes shrouded in mist, and Aiden's skin prickled. That flash of light in the alley, the lurch that had flung him across centuries, was it tied to those mountains? He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the moment. He'd survived. That was enough for now. The Sapa Inca summoned him to the golden throne, the nobles parting like a sea of feathers and turquoise. Through a translator, not Cusco Carl, thank God, who'd slunk away after his sabotage failed. The ruler's voice was warm but commanding. "You have pleased Inti and saved my people," he said, his eyes gleaming with something like respect. "You will stay as my head cook, Aiden of the Far Sea. Your food will strengthen the Tawantinsuyu." Aiden's jaw dropped. Head cook? Of the Inca Empire? It was the kind of gig that would have made his Manhattan colleagues drool. Executive chef to a king. No Yelp reviews required. But it also meant staying in 1100, in a world of stone knives and superstition, far from his restaurant, his team, his life. He bowed, muttering thanks in broken Quechua, his mind racing. Could he do this? Live here, maybe forever? He'd already changed these people's lives, with a few roasted potatoes and a quinoa trick. Imagine what he could do with time. Introduce irrigation from his hazy memory of a PBS documentary, or teach them to ferment maize into a proto-beer. He could be a legend, not just a line cook who'd lucked into a Michelin star. But New York called to him, the clatter of his kitchen, the buzz of a Saturday night rush, the smell of espresso and ambition. And that flash, what was it? A door through time, Inti had said. Could he find it again? As the festival wound down, the villagers pressed gifts into his hands, woven bracelets, a small clay pot, a llama wool shawl that smelled faintly of smoke. Inti stayed close, teaching him more Quechua words, her laughter a bright spot in the fading light. But the head priest, a gaunt figure with eyes like obsidian, approached, his white tunic stark against the colorful crowd. He leaned in, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You are no ordinary man, Aiden," he said, his translator echoing every word. "The mountains chose you. They opened the door to bring you here, to save us. But the door remains." He pointed to a distant peak, its summit glowing faintly, as if lit from within. "It calls you still. Will you answer?" Aiden's heart skipped. A door. Was that what had yanked him from 2025? His mind flashed to the alley, the blinding light, the sensation of falling through time itself. He wanted to ask more, but the priest turned away, vanishing into the crowd. Inti gripped his hand, her face pale. "Don't go," she whispered. "The mountains they take." Aiden's throat tightened. He'd grown fond of her, this brave kid who'd scrounged herbs and believed in him when no one else did. Leaving her felt wrong, but so did abandoning his own time, his own life. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, Aiden slipped away from the village, drawn to the mountain the priest had pointed to. The air grew colder as he climbed, his sneakers slipping on loose rocks. He didn't know what he was looking for, a glowing portal, a cosmic vending machine, anything. But he couldn't shake the feeling that answers waited up there. The festival's drums faded below, replaced by the eerie whistle of wind through the peaks. He reached a small plateau, where a circle of stones stood, their surfaces etched with symbols he couldn't read. In the center, the air shimmered, a faint ripple like heat rising from asphalt. His pulse quickened. This was it, the door, or whatever had brought him here. He stepped closer, and the shimmer intensified, a low hum vibrating in his chest. Images flashed in his mind. His restaurant, his sous chef Maria yelling at a line cook, the neon glow of Times Square. Home. But then he saw Inti's face, the villagers' smiles, the Sapa Inca's trust. He'd made a difference here, maybe a bigger one than he ever had in New York. The hum grew louder, and a voice, not his own, whispered in his head, "Choose. Stay and build a legacy, or step through and risk never returning." He reached out, his fingers brushing the shimmering air, and felt a jolt, like static electricity on steroids. Before he could decide, a shout broke the silence. Inti appeared, breathless, her small frame trembling in the cold. "I didn't know," she cried. "The door takes. My brother took him." Her words hit like a punch. Her brother? Was that how she knew about the mountains? Had someone else been pulled through time, or worse, lost to it? Aiden's hand froze, inches from the shimmer. The hum pulsed, urging him forward, but Inti's tear-streaked face held him back. He knelt, pulling her into a hug. "I'm not going anywhere yet," he said, though doubt gnawed at him. Was he lying? To her, or to himself? The shimmer flickered, then faded, leaving only the cold night air. The door was gone for now. Aiden's heart pounded. Had he missed his chance, or dodged a bullet? Inti clung to him, whispering about the mountain's secrets, stories of others who'd come and gone, their fates unknown. Aiden's mind spun. Was he part of some cosmic cycle, a pawn in a game he didn't understand? He looked at the stars, so different from New York's light-polluted sky, and felt the weight of his choice. Stay or go. Save this world, or chase his own. As he led Inti back to the village, the mountains loomed behind them, silent but alive, their peaks still glowing faintly. The Sapa Inca's offer waited, head cook a hero's life. But the priest's words, Inti's warning, and the vanished shimmer promised more mysteries. Aiden's story wasn't over. Far from it. Why you'll want to keep reading. What lies beyond the mountain's door? Will Aiden stay as the Inca's culinary savior, or risk everything to chase the shimmer back to 2025? And what's the truth about Inti's brother and the others who vanished? The answers are coming in the next chapter, packed with twists that'll leave you hungry for more. Subscribe and hit the bell to catch the continuation of Aiden's time-bending adventure. You won't want to miss what's cooking next.